Welcome back to the Tribal Lines podcast, another Survivor podcast talking about our favorite LRG, Survivor Branford, back in action, back in town. You know what? Episode 5, good episode. As far as some shock value, I would say maybe some suspense there. A lot going on. But the outcome it favors in one way and one way only, the way that it's been favoring all season, and that is the vets. What initial thoughts with episode 5?
I'm excited. I was excited to see how this merge played out, and it played out unfortunately a little bit how you could expect it. I would say this is around worst case scenario drama wise, like vote count, but with the way the idol was played and how Tim handled the episode and some of the dynamic going forward, I think it became a lot more dramatic than it was at face value, and it was a good time. I really loved the merge mission this episode, and I'm excited to just talk about where the dynamics come going forward, even though I think the dynamics maybe didn't shift or almost shifted back in some ways from
Yeah.
what I feel like the way things were trending. But
Mhm.
yeah, interested to talk about that and see what you think about some players' choices in this episode, because I don't think all around it was like a disaster of choices. I just think it was like a little bit on the safer side of how things
Well,
could have gone.
yeah, I mean, well, when it comes down to it, it's like the old classic, Survivor line. It's like if it's good for 7 people, is it really good for 7 people? No. There's not a move that is good for everybody. Someone's on the bottom of that seven. There's a group of people, you know what I mean, on the bottom of that seven when you get to seven. So you think you want to kind of use, you want to utilize your numbers, right? And the small game and the format and the pre-existing relationships and the knowledge of people's games in the past versus, they're not only are this one tribe that decimated another tribe, but that other tribe is newbies. They're not predictable in the slightest compared to everybody else that's already on your tribe. So it's about, I feel like the vets had this really strong approach, especially early on, with we can win and just, save ourselves and play it kind of safe, really capitalize, get this tribe down to 2, what ultimately happens. And, is it good at the number 9? Statistically, probably, right? It was probably the move. Maybe just not the ones that viewers wanted to see. But I think, at 9, you got to shake it up. So,
Yeah, I think there's something to what you said about predictability. Sometimes it's like deal with the devil you know and not the devil you don't. And for
yeah.
for the veterans, I think some of them are more okay with walking into the fire with the other veterans than trying to attack them and push battling these newbies down the road and maybe not knowing like what Tim, Steve, and Tasha are fully capable of. And
Yeah.
I mean, from what we've seen from their pre-merge, and they're three very capable players, I would say, and,
Yeah.
and you would have to be to an extent to survive 4 tribals in a row. So um, yeah, it's a little disappointing the outcome, but I think for some people this was the right move, and for some people it isn't.
Right. And, just to get into the episode and kind of just touch on what you said there, it's like, you know, the predictability is something that, the devil, the devil you don't know, like what you're saying there. They also got to know that these 3 are going to be tight, right? So that's another thing that you have to consider is you don't have 3 free agents. You don't have like this power, like these are a solid 3, and I think everybody knows that. And we know that to be true from, the pinky swearing and the in the episode. But, the 3 remaining Parkside members, talk about they're going to tell the veterans they're open to anything, hopefully use their connections from the ambassador and just try to use their minority group as a weapon rather than just something to kill off, because that can be useful, right? But it's like, who's it useful for, and who's it going to benefit in the long run? They picky swear they'll be the final 3. We'll see if that happens, but it's gonna, it's a tough battle in the beginning of this episode going into that, knowing that there's going to be a tribal, so it's tough.
Yeah, I don't know what to even say. I think let's just get started from where the episode started, like some initial combos. What were your thoughts, I guess? So Jim introduces the merge here, and we have I don't know, he does this little Jim thing where he makes like a little awkward speech, and it's good. I love it. It's so Jim, and we have um what is it? Oh yeah, we'll pick your ambassadors for the other tribe, and then we're
Yeah,
all gonna join together. It was goofy, but whatever, it was
I'll
fun.
take it.
And then so we're merged. So
Yeah.
um, I guess I don't know. What are your thoughts? What were your thoughts coming into this merge episode from these initial interactions? Maybe these first few confessionals. Who's sticking out to you? Maybe as a new pairing or someone you want to see interact but hasn't got to interact so far, something like that.
Well, when I initially see that there's a merge, I'm excited because not only does this three possibly have to go to tribal council as a three, but it's like, okay, now we can shake it up. Now we're going to see the other tribe go to tribal. So I really was interested in thinking and seeing right away, what Tyler's initial gut check feeling was it going to be we're saying seven solid, or these three, or is this something that we could utilize to our advantage? As far as like, standing out, someone on the Tyler tribe who's just standing out to me, someone who I think isn't afraid to bob and weave and to do something to no shade at him so far in the game, but someone like who I don't think like Brandon, I don't think is bobbing weave nearly as good as Sarah. I think Sarah's putting herself in a much better position than Brandon. Brandon's kind of like laying too much back at this point. Like the game's starting to move, and I feel like he's just, you know, I feel like it would be in his interest to not go with the seven, like Sarah and Dennis. I don't think that's another thing that we'll get into, but I feel like Sarah's doing a really good job of like kind of just bobbing and weaving, whether it's with information or with who she's talking to.
Yeah, I think Sarah like is definitely keeping her options open and kind of seeing where like I think there's a point where she kind of like is open to or considering like the opportunity to like work with the trio, but then like reconsiders and goes with this alternate plan. Like she doesn't seem too stuck on something and ultimately goes with the seven, but I feel like she's hearing everyone out and I feel like she's the person that it seems like the new players are going to the most, even maybe going to next round if they're trying to make their push again. Like she seems like the one that's hearing them out the most. And I think if things do change in the next episode, she's going to be a key part of that. Um, I mean, probably Dennis and Brandon too, just by association, but it
Yeah.
feels like she's kind of the one creating the dialogue, the inroad there. So I give her a lot of credit going forward into that game. The way she played this round is something I would really respect going into a jury vote eventually if it comes down to it.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. Someone who's kind of starting to come out of the woodwork a little bit. It's been fun to see. But something about like, when we're watching this merge get together is, Steve, Tim, Tasha, they're immediately going to try to talk to anybody to see if anyone's going to turn flip, find the cracks, rightfully so, right? But what I found like really awesome and was kind of fun to see is like Pat is going to get away with this.
Yeah, like Pat. Oh my God, him lucking out because they just talked about Jackson's fake idol that he gave to
Christy,
Christie, and then creating this whole story, and then that lets Pat play his fake idol at the merge. Like ridiculous that this actually worked. They like, and I think everyone has bought into it. Like at least on camera. Like wow. Like I'm kind of
incredible.
shocked. Like in some ways it was perfect, and I feel like he mostly lucked out. I I feel like Danny did a lot of the heavy lifting with like, wow, this is so legit. Like Danny was like really buying into it, and then I think everyone like once someone like Danny who was really suspicious of Pat is with Pat, then like everyone was really on it. Wow, what a revolution for Pat's game if he can hold that down. I mean, I think that really obviously there's still like the Pat Michelle dilemma to keep in the back of the mind and how he handled that. But I mean, like I said, I think we said earlier in the podcast, I think the idol shit was so much worse.
Oh yeah,
And I don't know, like to have an out on this and to be able to just get rid of it. Whew, wow, what a perfect moment for Pat, and kind of funny too. Like just that even happened to happen and work out that way.
yeah. No, absolutely. And we see right away the seven want to stick together as a seven. No one's really like, excuse me, no one's really rocking the boat any which way with the seven. They want to kind of stay the seven strong. Tell the newbies, obviously what they want to hear. Um, but Brandon, we're talking about Brandon a little bit. Brandon's kind of nervous that Sarah may go and tell Tasha about the trio that they have, Brandon, Dennis, and Sarah, getting it back. There's all these trios, right? There's all these
Yeah,
trios.
there's three trios and Pat, pretty
That's
much.
the final 10. That's crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
The power of the trios.
Yeah, and I was really expecting like Pat to have a big moment in this episode, and he
Yeah.
kind of he kind of didn't in a way. Like I don't know. I thought
Well,
I thought this
he didn't want
vote
to
would
rock the boat.
I thought this vote would either be two trios and Pat and another trio, or like Pat and a trio versus like a 4-3-3, or like something weird. Like there Pat had like especially once he like got off the boat a bit, Pat had a lot of power this episode to
Yeah,
really
didn't
change
really
his
utilize it.
dynamic. Do you think do you think it would have been worth it for Pat to do something bigger here? Or
Yeah,
do you think
I
he
do.
was one of the people? Yeah, what do you think he should have done? Do you think he should have worked with the newbies to vote out a vet? Where does and even if he does do that, where does he go from there, you think?
Well, if this triangle's a triangle, right, and they keep calling Pat the four, and you see these newbies come over too, if I'm Pat, I'm seeing like money signs. I'm like, wow, I could change the game right here. Get these newbies, get these three. Yeah, I'll be in your three. Like I'll be your four. Like I'll be your four to Dennis, Sarah, and like be that guy. Like now's the time to do. Like let's make
Yeah, he
that
could
move.
be the if you're gonna be the four in everything, you might as well own it and try to jump back and forth as the four and kind of use those threes against each other, you know?
Well, that's the
But
thing. Go ahead.
I don't think he's just not aware of the three of Brandon, Dennis, Sarah to the extent that it is. I think he thinks that's more of a four. Like I'm
Yeah.
convinced Pat I'm just not like fully on like I don't understand fully where Pat sees himself in that veterans tribe. I go back and forth with it. It seems like his closest connections are with those like the Brandon, Dennis, Sarah trio, but he also has like a lot of on-screen strategic moments with Michelle and Danny and Haley, like where he's trying, and it just it seems like he isn't fully sure like where he's at. And I feel like despite not having gone to tribal, it's still a little late in the game for him to not be a little more solidified
Uh,
like in anything. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just unsure where it feels like we've got an alliance moment with every person in this game except Pat now.
I don't know exactly or for sure where Pat's journey is, but I was actually inclined to ask you, if we are seeing these three trios and Pat, and that's like the viewer perspective, and that's what's true in the game that we're seeing. If Pat had the strategic thought in that moment to pick a trio and talk to them first about like let's make something happen. Where's his best interest to go? Is it with that Sarah, Danny, and Brandon, and then you grab the newbies? Is that the best way to go about it? Because, or do you think he goes to Michelle and is like, let's work together? Because that would be insane too. Because I'm like, come on, like just he. If I was Pat, and I am Pat, but if I was that Pat, I would have went up to Brandon and Sarah, you guys want to make a move? You guys can even tell me who. Like, let's make a move. Like, we still have we still have us four, and then the newbies are gonna be loyal to us. That could be like our new seven, and like they're gonna be 7-6-5. We're 4-3-2-1. Like, let's make something happen, right? And I would have had that, but like give them the power to say the name and to give the information and to just be like, I'm open to anything. If you guys don't want to do it, like I'll stay seven strong. Like, but putting it out there and being like for real with it, and being like, and maybe even pulling one of them like after me, like I'm like for real, like grabbing like maybe a Dennis or a Brandon, be like I'm like for real, like can we do this? Like
Yeah, I think you're right. You can't go to the newbies first because the newbies can easily just throw you under the bus
Yeah,
and
exactly.
like be too aggressive about it. Because especially with the way the vets have been stonewalling them, they would be kind of in the right to. So you got to go to a trio of the vets first, and yeah, like from what we've seen, it just makes more sense for that Brandon Sarah Dennis trio approach. And I think you're hitting it on the dot. Like um he needs to set himself out. Like from what we've seen so far in the game, I just don't think Pat's game can be taken seriously enough at the end relative to a fellow veteran, even if he falls lock in step with a group and through the rest of this merge. Like if we're comparing their games, like from what we've seen, like if you're locked in step, like you're not gonna overtake like a story for Dennis or um Sarah or really any of these veterans right now. They've all played like just consistent and like keeping their stories straight and just I would have a hard time um thinking that Pat was very intentful with everything he's done, even if it was really good throughout the merge. When what we saw earlier, what we heard earlier, was intentful but very messy and just unorganized. So at this point, you have to set yourself out in some way, and I think he this was a round to do that. I mean, if not this round, it has to be next round. It has to be
Yeah.
waiting till seven is just too late in this game. This game is too small, and eight, seven's an odd number. It's easier to do stuff like that in odd numbers, but maybe not. Maybe this season, I thought there was potential for a big move during this merge vote, even though it wasn't an odd number, just because of the trios, and maybe we could
Yeah.
have seen some plurality. Maybe we could have done a 4-3-3 in some way, and the dynamic shift. But then you're like, oh, maybe it could have been a 5-4 after. So you don't want to do a plurality, but the dynamics can shift in a lot of ways, especially with idols out,
Yeah.
especially with Michelle's idol looming and such. So yeah, I and especially with Tim finding an idol, if he was working with the newbies, maybe there could have been something coordinated there, something a little more complicated. Who knows what could have
Yeah.
been done? I mean, if he saves Tim, Tim saves the idol, maybe something else happens next round. Completely shifts things around, makes Pat look a little like the savior. But also, if he sticks with the newbies, then or if he tries to make a big move with the movie newbies, now the newbies are deeper in the game, and I mean they would probably get more credit for that than Pat would in some ways for them surviving. So
Yeah.
it is
No,
it is
valid.
kind of a little tough situation, and I don't think there's a perfect answer for it, and it's really just how you craft a narrative for yourself going to final tribal. I mean, I think that's something that I was always doing while playing Branford, and I think most people should do
Yeah.
while they're playing Survivor as best you can, is kind of just recollect yourself every once in a while and think, how is this going to look like at the end when I'm talking to a jury? How do they perceive me, and how am I going to present myself to be perceived? Because you can't just do all these moves and think about how they look, how they work strategically. There's a social element to it that has to be portrayed later, and I don't know.
Mhm. That's a really good point too, because it's also like for Pat, it's like if he does get to the end, it's like, hey, what does that look like? And B is like you said earlier, is like, is his game taken serious because of the really, really poor pre-merge? Like, of course, it was very entertaining, but from a game standpoint, I mean, in that seven, B7. So it's like, it's one of those things where I was just, were you shocked that they weren't giving the newbies much? Like, were you shocked at that, or is that come to no surprise that the newbies were pretty kind of you know
It,
pretty
I
much
don't know. I don't know. I
going on.
think I was a little shocked because here's the thing. If a trio wanted to work with the newbies, say you vote six strong against the other three, or even five strong against the other four, and then you're 5-3 or something, or 6-3, yeah, 6-3. Then you could always try and jump back with them. But I guess there is the danger that maybe the other side of the vets would then work with the newbies the next round. The newbies would try and jump back and forth. So it's really all about how comfortable you feel with your relationships with the newbies. And I guess I just thought the Dennis, Brandon, Sarah trio would be giving a little more information, or at least setting them up a little for the next round more so, like, hey, we can't do anything for you this round, but maybe next round. And then even in the case of an idol, most likely they would be idling one of the other vets trio that they were going to go for anyways. So I don't think that would be the worst if one side like set themselves up to work against the others, because what are the newbies going to do? Are they really going to throw those three, like the vets that want to work with them, under the bus? I think that would also be an awful
Be
move for
detrimental to
them
the
to do.
newbies at that point in the game. I feel like because you're looking for a Hail Mary out there when you're coming into a majority slash minority with the numbers looking like that. Uh, so rightfully so. Steven, Tim, Tasha, doing anything they can to stay alive. There's a lot of people saying that they want to work with Steve. There's a lot of people saying they want to work with. They're just not like this number of 10 is not the right move to do so. I'm interested in your thoughts, like going into this, like of the three, whose name did you think was going to come up, first out of those three? Because I
It's a
thought
good
Steve was going to
question.
be in the best spot, and it sounded like he was until the vote. So
I think the problem becomes, and I think this is something I might have mentioned in earlier podcasts, is Steven in some ways became the most medium person to choose, right? Like
yeah,
I feel like Tim, maybe not medium, but like I feel like Tim and Tasha are the slightly bigger threats, which is a good position to be when you're in the majority, but like to not be the biggest threat. But when you're in the minority, like you kind of want to be a little more vocal, a little more aggressive. And I feel like from what we saw in this episode, Tasha and Tim were doing better at like the scrambling portion, and Steven, I don't know, he just seemed really frustrated this whole episode. Like you could see it when the challenge was going on. He felt like he really did not want to step down and was really worried for himself. And I don't know, maybe like if I were him, maybe I would have came off a little more confident. Like that's the only
yeah,
thing I could think of he could have done. Like I think the other players saw him kind of down and defeated and figured like he doesn't have an idol. Like I think he's in the most likely to be voted out here. I mean, they did split against him, so it doesn't really matter if he had an idol, but I mean, I think the way they split, if the newbies did all want to vote together, they could have voted Danny out or something. Like that, it wasn't like a perfect split. It was like with the newbies involved. I would have to look at the vote count again, but I feel like
yeah,
I thought that after. Um, because let me look. I'm gonna do
yeah.
live skim right now of the episode because now I'm really interested. So, um, Michelle voted Tim. Brandon voted Tim. Um, Danny voted Tim. Haley voted Tim. Steven voted Tim. Tasha voted Tim. Sarah voted Steven. Pat voted Steven. So that's two Steven. Uh, okay, so it was three Steven. So it would have just tied. So that didn't really actually matter because
True.
they would have voted Steven on the revote. Even if the three of them voted someone. So yeah, good on Steven and Tasha for trying to do something else, or vote for Tim. Might as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think him being so disappointed in the challenge was the one thing that was pointed out to me, or like I felt like, I don't know. It's like a look of weakness a little bit. Like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe he feels in a corner. We should feel comfortable. So I don't know.
No, yeah. I mean, you got to utilize like anything you have out there. Uh, so let's get into this community challenge though, a little bit. I kind of want to talk about this. Each person has to hold their arms out straight with like a plate, bowl filled with some water. One by one, players select the numbers. Whichever name is behind the selected numbers gets either water or sand added to their bowls. Tough challenge. Steve got a lot of weight. Tim's name was drawn the least. But push comes to shove, and Brandon wins immunity here, and Brandon is safe. I don't think Brandon was ever vulnerable here anyway. So good for Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Brandon's play though. So
Yeah,
Brandon sends it to like a random like pick at the end, like the number because they were picking the names from the clothesline. So then it switched to like they were all kind of in pain, so switched to random chance, I guess.
yeah,
It was a little confusing because it seemed like some of them the person picked would drop, and then the last one the person picked one. I think there was one where it switched.
yeah.
I was very confused, but yeah, it seemed like everyone followed through. I don't know if I did Tim didn't have the merge mission yet at that point, right? Like was this
No,
challenge
no. I think
so
that's right before tribal almost.
yeah, if Tim knew about the merge mission, I would have just like told Brandon to F off and then maybe grabbed the idol too and had immunity. Like I don't know. I would have been a little more aggressive at the end there. Like
Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised he did that. Maybe he had like a feeling that maybe he had whisperings already that Steven was like gonna be a priority vote over him, even though it didn't end up being that. He did get the majority. Like it did come down to him, the vote. So I don't know. I guess I feel like that was the wrong move for him to drop, but good on Brandon to kind of I mean, two out of the four people left were people they were trying to target, so doing the random chance I guess helped his odds if he felt like he was struggling. It's tough to ignore the deal when you're the first one that has to drop, right? When you're
yeah.
Tim and it's one on one, then it's like, oh, I could push it, right? Like and
I don't
try
know.
and
I
go
would I
for it.
would I would have
But
kept pushing it because like
yeah,
you brought up a really
I
good
mean,
point.
I wouldn't have agreed to in the first place, you know? Like if
Yeah.
you're gonna
What do you
lose,
say in
like
that moment? You're just like,
I would just say Brandon, like all the newbies are kind of like been stonewalled out so far. Like need a little more reassurance on your guys' end before we're dropping out challenges, you know?
yeah.
Like something
Well,
like
that's fair.
that. Like I don't know, call them out on their shit. Like
Yeah. What else do
like
you have to?
hit
They have nothing else to lose at this point. I mean,
yeah,
they
you have
clearly
nothing to
know that no
lose.
one
I
wants to
mean,
work with them there. Like at this point in the game.
wor worst case, the same thing happens. Brandon wins immunity, and you're gonna try the same pitch, and probably the same thing happens. So I don't know. I don't. They were either too comp. I feel like the newbies were either, or Tim and specifically Tim and um Steven as the last two in this challenge were either too confident in the vets or not aggressive enough, or we're really struggling and we're gonna lose. Maybe Brandon looks steady. I mean, I don't know how hard that is. Like you said, Steven, I think had the most weight, and he had it like the first few rounds too, which means he's just holding more weight longer, which weighs on you more. I mean, that's the hard part almost is not the weight itself, like straight up, but like holding like weight for a long period of time, it wears on your muscles. So yeah, I don't. I'm not a huge fan of challenges like this, just because judging them from a judging perspective is hard. Like where at what point are their arms dropped? At one point are
Yeah.
their arms bent? It's a tough one to judge. But
Sure.
yeah. Congrats to Brandon, and he's in the final nine.
Let's go, Brandon. Only, I mean, in
Not
this
that kind of let's go, Brandon.
in this kind of context. Let's be clear. Um, but you know, we get to after the challenge. Brandon has immunity. Seems like it's going Tim's way. The vote. We talk about a little bit of a split vote here, just in case of an idol. Um, they kind of talk about how they think Steve's like just more loyal than Tim, and Tasha wants to vote for whoever. She's kind of just done at this point. She's just like, I'll vote, and I think she's for real here. Not done in the sense of like giving up, but like just like knows the move isn't gonna move. It's not the time to make a move for the other seven, and that's kind of clear here. They'll vote for whoever it is to prove their loyalty and to stay in the game. Nobody's really given Tasha a name here. Starts to get a little frustrated, but she wants to just prove her loyalty. I mean, I'd be frustrated too. It's like I'm on the bottom. It's like, and you guys are either splitting the vote or voting a seven. Like you're either voting for me if you're not telling me anything, and then they don't even vote for her. So I feel like they were just more open with the people that like. I feel like they were the least with Tasha, like at least real with Tasha.
Yeah, yeah, I don't understand it, especially because it felt like I don't know. I felt like they were really good with Tasha, like when the ambassadors came over, but also like when the ambassadors reported back to the vets, it felt like they kept saying like, "Oh, Tasha's like the ringleader over there, like she's leading things." So I think the narrative like that came to the vets back from the ambassadors seemed to be that like, oh, to Tasha's someone to look out for. So I think that might have been part of the approach on why they were scared to give her too much information. I think ultimately this is also why we see like Steven. Well, I don't know because Steven wasn't the main target. I keep forgetting that there's an idol play. So Steven,
Yeah.
I almost think from what you learned this episode from the vets, I would have targeted Steven straight up because you see that Steven and Tasha are the two that are tight and loyal to each other, and then they're willing to throw it on Tim. But I don't know. You think Steven, maybe Steven, I guess Steven does the same thing if he hears that, oh, the votes are all going on Tasha, then he votes with Tim onto Tasha. So maybe not. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think what why do you think truly that it ends up on Steven more than anyone? Like I
Well, the idol for
maybe
one, and then
yeah.
like I mean, if they're gonna split it, I think at that point, if they're gonna say seven strong and split the vote, there's only three people to split it, and I think that maybe just things we weren't seeing, or maybe they just thought of the three, Tasha might be the one with the idol if there is one. Um,
Mm.
or the most capable of finding a merge idol out of the three, or like anything like that, or maybe she just had more social connections and more, more future to her game, like future prospect to her game that we didn't really see. I mean, we saw like bits and pieces of her having good conversations, but then we also see bits and pieces of people telling her nothing at all. So I think it kind of going back to what you said, Steve. It's like kind of just like the other easy target in that sense of the minority probably doesn't have an idol, pretty defeated in the challenge, like just kind of just defeated overall, like really, really, really like he's probably the most eager of the three, like to make a move. So I think it's kind of just like, if we're gonna split it on, let's split it on the two boys, you know?
Yeah, and it works obviously, and they avoid the idle play from Tim and get out one of their two main targets. I mean, I liked the merge mission for sure. Tim kind of yucking it up at the
He delivered,
tribal
man. He sounds like
council.
me right now. Sorry if you're listening to me. I sound very nasally. I was coughing it up, but not as good as Tim, loudly clearing his throat when someone's talking and asking how to spell Dan. So it was good. I liked that. I've never seen a merge mission like that for an idol. I thought that was very creative. Big points to whoever came up with that. I was a huge fan. I'm glad Tim found it right away. It was very very Survivor. Uh,
Yeah, and it helped his game in a sense, I think, in some ways because he was able to play it right away. So I think he'll be able to just kind of, you
Like what
know,
else? What
he'll
else
he'll be
would
able
he
to
do?
he'll be able to just explain what he did right after and why he did those things. You can just straight up tell him. It's not like he's like holding on to the idol for later. Like obviously he was going to play it, but just like it's not something you can like draw suspicion back to later. Like, oh, Tim was acting weird at tribal mates related to something. Like the idol's gone and good, so he can just own it. And I think this opens up his game a lot. I mean, hopefully something will happen at this final nine vote. There's a lot of room to maneuver things in odd numbers. And now, I mean, now we're looking at our numbers. We have a three, a two, and a one. Like a lot of ways those numbers can join up, and got to break up some of them at some point. I mean, otherwise, it's gonna be vets vying for Pat at final
Yeah,
seven, and we see. I mean, we've seen all evidence of how that should go,
yeah,
right? It should be one of Michelle, Danny Haley, but I mean, they also have the idol, so you never know.
yeah. Leaves a lot of room open. There's still like the game's still wide open in a sense of like I know the numbers seem small, things seem cut and dry, but especially in these quick, fast games. Like the game can shift, the game can move. I hope it does. Um, just getting into it, Tim plays his idol that he successfully earns in the voting booth at the merge mission. Pat plays his fake idol. You know,
He
you
gets
know,
away with it, and everyone's like, "Oh, Pat, like
yeah. Oh,
watch him,
oh
watch him
shucks,
now."
and you
Like,
could just, that. I was glad to see that he played it, and that it's just like maybe the narrative that like maybe we're gonna get something new out of Pat coming. Hopefully make a move here at the final nine. Uh,
yeah.
but we get the vote count: 6 votes for Tim, do not count. 1 vote for Danny, 3 votes for Steve. Steve gets voted out. My boy gets robbed. It's a right, fucking idle play. But guess what, man? Played well. Good job, Steve. But that's the game, man. As our buddy Jay West says, charge into the game, dude. It's part of the game, and even Dennis is like, that's tough. It's tough to go out an idle. Been there before. Not fun, but you made the merge, so good job, Steve. You know,
It's tough. I think Steven played good overall. It's a weird type of game for him where I don't think he lost strategically, but he lost it through idols and definitely lost it through challenges. Like,
yeah,
like had to win some damn challenges. You can't go into the merge down uh 4 members and expect to be in a great spot. I mean, you have a chance, but it could have just as easily been Tasha or Tim, and I mean,
could
it
have.
basically almost was Tim. So yeah, you gotta hope you're lucky and hope. I mean, Tim getting that merge idol was unfortunate. Like anyone else getting it would have obviously been better. I think even if Tasha gets it, she probably plays it on herself and
Right,
Tim
yeah. I
goes
mean,
home. So literally the worst person that could have got that for him, and the dynamic probably changes at final nine. So a tough draw for Steven, but a good game, and I'm looking forward to Steven on the jury as the first person, first merge boot here, and the
yeah,
first person to kind of see both perspectives of this game, whereas all the veterans that are on this jury will only have the merge perspective, and
yeah. It's a
our
different.
our other two newbie champions, who knows how much longer they'll last, but I'm sure Steven is setting a new tone for this jury. And well, for those who don't know, Branford juries are open to any members of the game that are voted out. So technically, all the pre-jurors could be a part of it. I think all merged people are required, and all pre-jury people, if they want to go home, they can. But usually like half of them stay.
That's it for Survivor Branford, episode 5. Before we head on out of here, Ryan, do you have any final thoughts you want to share? Anything about episode 5? Anything looking forward?
I'm looking forward to this dynamic changing at 9. I feel like it has to, or some people are just making a big mistake. Like I know you gotta be scared of the newbies making
Yeah,
the end, but there's still a lot of rounds to get them out, and maybe you make a move with them at 9, get one out at 8, make a move on one at 7, get one out at 6, and you still had 2 rounds of like shifting dynamics to go. So you gotta do something on these odd numbered rounds. Odd numbers are always the key in Survivor, unless you have like a bunch of extra votes rolling around. But I guess my last thought before we close, I know it's late. Who would you say of the veterans? I'm gonna leave out the newbies, but of the veterans this episode, who made the best move and who made the worst move? So
I think Pat had the ability to take power or to try to attempt to do something where the other threes are in just pairs of three. I think Pat has a missed opportunity here, and that could come back to really bite him when he really could have done something here, shake things up. And I think this could be good for Steven going out 7-2. I want to say this is good for, it's pretty good for Danny.
see, I wonder that, but like I feel like it's good for Danny if the newbies would want to work with them, like the other two, but aren't the other two gonna be drawn to the other three still more? I just
Probably. and I know he was called out at tribal council and like had a vote cast against him. I just feel like kind of what you said with like when Pat brought that thing up with the idol, and then as soon as Danny was on every, I feel like he's just very like swayable and has the ability to kind of to maneuver. And I think if he wanted to make a move on someone, people will follow suit. Or, I just feel like he could be in a really good position going forward here. I feel like Dennis is in a good position still. Um, even
Yeah.
Sarah. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what they do from there. And yeah, I'm interested to see what happens in the next episode. This is a make or break episode. This next one sets the
yeah,
tone for the rest of the season.
it
So
is.
we'll
I'm
see.
looking
No
forward to it.
pagongings, no pagongings.
Yeah, yeah. Please, let's hope it gets shaken up a bit. I'm hoping for it. I'm looking forward to it. So we want to thank everybody for listening, and we will see you all for episode 6 of Survivor Branford 2024. Appreciate it.